that's why we're all here tonight. This little guy, this man with the bald head, fingers over the wall, and the slogan with him became very famous during World War II. In fact, this little guy, the slogan became as famous, I would say, as Remember Pearl Harbor, and the little fella became as famous as Uncle Sam, you could say. And it was a symbol for the American servicemen. And any place in the world that he would go, you would end up seeing one of these guys, hand-etched, chalked, somehow it magically appeared. And even during an invasion, you would see it maybe on a rock as you were landing on the island. That had supposedly never had an American on it before, but it was there. You didn't know how it got there. But it was a symbol of courage, pride, encouragement, definitely a morale booster. These are some of the places you might have seen the Kilroy Was Here logo. An ammo can. But if I had been doing it, I would have waited until, or I would have taken all the ammo out of it, written it in the bottom, and then put it back in and laid it or something. That's more like what you're supposed to do. Make it fun. And then on a Jeep or really any kind of a military vehicle, the nose art of a plane, the fuselage of the plane. Wait a minute, go back. I wasn't ready. There, I need to use my pointer there. So that was a kind of a really neat calling card. Now, this is a picture I got off the internet. It looks staged to me, but the point of this one is that even during battle, you might need to take a break from the battle because you're scared, you're exhausted, you're fed up, you've seen your friend killed, you don't know whether to dodge or duck a bullet, maybe you'll go right into the bullet. I mean, war is war. But when you could know that Kilroy had been there before you and survived, your fellow soldier, then that was encouraging. And if it wasn't there, then you got that chalk out of your pocket and you made sure the ones coming behind you found it. Just a few more pictures of where Kilroy might appear. And so apparently, there were some commanders who had an exception, didn't take kindly to this graffiti, didn't take it seriously, and they would order their troops to not put it up, and if they did find it, to make sure they removed it. But this was always greeted with monumental indifference by the troops. Then you come to this guy. Now, this is not my story. There was a Kilroy Was Here website that stood up there and is still up. And my mentor, Patrick Tillery, created it and was in charge of it for many a year. And this was his story that he got off the British internet. And he said that those who tried to shut down Kilroy during the war, Hitler was one of them. According to one story, it was reported that German intelligence had found the phrase on captured American equipment. And this began leading Adolf Hitler to believe that Kilroy could be some sort was here. Everybody in the pilot house thought I was crazy, and it was some time before anyone would take me seriously. But there it was, on about 1,000 yards from the first landing beach, at the top of a pile of rocks was a sign that said Kilroy was here. No one had an explanation for how it got there. No American could have been there, could have gotten there, and no Jap would do it. We were the first in, and no one in the landing party had made it ashore at that time. Now that's part of the mystique of Kilroy and these signs. Now, I'm going to give you a couple of spoiler alerts, so I feel like I'm a magician giving away the magic tricks. But, of course, now we know that they would send out underwater demolition teams, and they would sneak ashore, and they would, how many saw that movie, South Pacific, the old movie, The South Pacific, where they get one guy who knew the islands in the area to scout out, and in a very precarious, because they were always looking, Japanese would always be looking for you, you know, and worrying about you. Meanwhile, you were sending information on where to bomb and how the positioning of the troops and so forth, of the enemy troops. So they would So that didn't come out of there. It's made up. Why would you do that? Why would you mislead people that way? That was really disturbing to me. Anyway, that's the gist of that. Quickly done away with. All right, now we are getting to the real story of Kilroy, okay? This sign, which I've never seen in person, but is at the Four River Shipyard in Quincy, Massachusetts. And I did a program at the World War II weekend in the beginning, first week in June, this past June, June. And some people who had been there recently said the sign's still there. And that's what's so neat about it is they recognize that Kilroy came from their shipyard. And that is the row of rivets. And they recognize him. They claim him as their guy. Well, how does this all start? It started in 1946 after the war was over. And the American Transit Association sponsored a contest nationwide on the radio in their program called Speak to America. And they announced that they were going to have a contest where they gave a prize to the person who could express the most compelling explanation for how the Kilroy Was Here slogan and logo got started. So almost 40 guys stepped up and said, I'm the real Kilroy. But the one who won was named James J. Kilroy, and he was from Halifax, Massachusetts, and he was deemed the genuine article. What did he say that convinced all these people that he was the real Kilroy? He was the only one of those entrants who thought to provide proof. And his proof was the people he worked with at the Four River Shipyard in Quincy, Massachusetts, where he was a rate setter and a rivet checker. And we're going to talk about that. One of the people who did work with him was quoted in an article as saying, Walter Hinchin of Quincy, who also worked at the shipyard during the war, said, and I'm quoting, it was common knowledge around the shipyard who Kilroy was. We all knew it was Jim Kilroy, the checker, who started that Kilroy Was Here business. And so it was that he won the prize. Well, what was the prize? What did he win? Well, remember, it's a transit association sponsoring it. He won a full-size trolley car. Now, his daughter reports some years after that this Kilroy, and there you see him standing in the doorway with his wife, Margaret, and their 9 children. And Margaret says that her dad never even wanted to enter the contest. He said, this is just a silly, foolish prize. But his wife, it was getting towards Christmas now, and she looked at the 9 children and said, Jim dear, we don't have any, what are we going to give them? Wouldn't it be great to have a clubhouse or even a couple extra bunks somewhere? And so he changed his mind, and I guess they were happy that they did. But so here they are, bringing it in. Now, 22 tons is nothing to sneeze at. And here you see, these pictures I'm showing you are all from the newspaper, so this is factual, definitely. He won the contest. Now, you can see Kilroy right here. I'm saying, get out of the way, you're too close, But he's like, no, it's on a cable, and they're loading it onto the flatbed trailer, and he's, go this way 6 inches, or whatever he's doing, I don't know. But it cracks me up. selling them so to pay for the refit. Well, they gave this to my husband and me, which I thought was so wonderful. This, well, I want to just examine how you do some riveting because I had to educate myself on that. And to me, it was fascinating. So I want you to get the heft of it and put that one. And make sure it gets back to me when it's over. So that's what Kilroy was doing. He was, the riveters got paid by how many holes they filled with rivets on their shift, as it was piecework. So somebody had to count all the rivets, and that was his job. Well, but that was not his only job. And he was also a great setter. And the best way to explain that was two articles. One was his obituary. His wife had some words about it. And the other was a magazine in the 1995 article in the Quincy Sun. So the riveters were paid by the piece. Okay. But some riveting jobs were harder than others or more difficult to reach. ships that he happened to know he worked on. And so the people who were, let's say they were going to England and they had two-week crossing and they had to run in the ship till then, they would have seen everywhere that Kilroy wrote his look. Probably over their hammocks, you know. If you've ever been to the John W. Brown Liberty ship, one of the most interesting things is how the hammocks were stacked 5 high and climb up. Yeah, it's cool. Well, at any rate, they would have had no idea who Kilroy was, but that whoever he was, they knew he got around, and he always So, but it got delivered to them. And and she still lived there at the time of this interview, and she said, and now it goes to the town hall and then it gets delivered to me. So that's cool, isn't it? But that reminds, how many of you saw the movie Miracle on 34th Street? Yeah, remember the last scene when the Santa Claus guy gets delivered all the mail? They undo it, right? And the judge is so relieved he doesn't have to disappoint all the children and say there's no really Santa Claus. And he said, if the post office says you're Santa Claus or Kilroy, then who am I to override a government agency? However they said it. But same thing. I thought it was so cool. So while we're focusing on this, I happen to have read something in Our Navy magazine in October of 1971, and that tells us what But if I don't find it, you know, it's okay to carry a piece of chalk in your pocket. Chalk will wash off in the rain. Nobody can get you mad at you. But, and here's another, when I'm standing in Reading at the World War II show, maybe some of you know that, this is an air raid warden shack, and Kilroy is always there for, he is happy to do a picture with you. Anyway, I have a homework assignment for you, and that is, every time I tell the story of Kilroy, I challenge my audience to share it, because the younger generation, the kids of today, have never heard this story, or rarely. And so we want to keep it alive. And there are several ways you might be able to do that. One is to share the story. And I'm not going to do it to you tonight, because I didn't get my stamp pad wet. But I have a green stamp pad, and I used to stamp Kilroy Was Here. And then you can't wash it off until you've shared the story with somebody. You could do that, just like tying a string around your finger. Or we also were trying to get a Kilroy Was Here postal stamp before all the veterans died, but we've tried and taken petition after petition signatures. Nothing's come of it so far. And then, but you can also buy a t-shirt. They're available, I don't sell them, but they're available. I have 3 different ones. And you can also learn how to draw him. You can, I have a couple of papers up here, but it's on the Kilroy Was Here website too. And just learn how to draw him. I used to get the World War II magazine, and the editor, when he wrote his editorial piece in every magazine, he'd sign it, Kilroy Was Here. I love that. I thought that was so cool. The other thing you could do, which I don't really recommend, but you could, actually, over here on the table, this is really cool. I went and did this story for this program for some vets, a group of vets. And this guy came up to me afterwards, and he said, look, and he went like this, and he has a Kilroy Was Here. He was a Marine, and he had it on the back of his neck. And then we were at the show in Reading, and we got 2 more people, and they weren't necessarily vets. This one guy said I was not in the military, I'm just a history buff. And so he had it on his knee, and then on the back, we had a guy come up, and it's on his arm. So, what a joy. So, thank you for your kind attention, I really appreciate it. Yeah.
I want to ask the audience, have any of you done it already? I did in the years past. I wrote it on